The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a process server who wouldn't meet Mara Hendricks' eyes as he handed over the envelope. She stood in the doorway of the apartment she'd called home for 3 years, her 7-year-old daughter, Ivy, pressed against her leg, and read the words that made her stomach drop. 14 days to vacate premises. Behind her, the small one-bedroom in South Philadelphia held everything they owned. Not much, really. Furniture from thrift stores, Ivy's books arranged on cinder block shelves, the second-hand laptop Mara used for her freelance graphic design work that had dried up 6 months ago when her biggest client went bankrupt, still owing her $4,200. 14 days. Mara closed the door and leaned against it, fighting the urge to slide down to the floor and just surrender. But Ivy was watching with those enormous brown eyes that saw too much, understood too much for a child who should still believe adults had everything under control. Mom? Is it the money thing again? The money thing. As if their entire lives hadn't been consumed by the money thing for the past year. As if Mara hadn't been rationing meals, skipping her own lunch, so Ivy could have something in her school lunchbox that didn't scream poverty to the other kids. We'll figure it out, baby. The lie tasted like ash. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mara almost didn't answer. Creditors had stopped being polite months ago, but something made her swipe to accept. Ms. Hendricks? The voice was elderly, male, with the careful diction of someone who'd spent a lifetime pronouncing things precisely. My name is Leonard Hartwell. I'm the executor of your late uncle's estate. Sebastian Hendricks? Mara's breath caught. Uncle Sebastian, her father's younger brother, the eccentric one nobody talked about much. She'd met him exactly twice in her childhood, once at her grandmother's funeral when she was 9, and again at her father's funeral when she was 17. Both times, he'd seemed uncomfortable around people, preferring to examine pocket watches he pulled from his vest rather than make conversation. Sebastian died? The words came out sharper than intended. 3 months ago, I'm afraid. Natural causes. He was 71. A pause. I've been trying to locate you for some time, Ms. Hendricks. Your uncle left you his entire estate. The word estate conjured images that couldn't possibly apply to Uncle Sebastian, who'd lived in some nowhere town in Pennsylvania that Mara couldn't even remember the name of. But hope was a dangerous thing when you were 14 days from homelessness. What estate? The Temporal Museum of Mechanized Horology. Leonard pronounced each word carefully, as if they were precious. It's a clock museum in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Quite extensive. Your uncle spent 47 years collecting and restoring timepieces from around the world. The building and its contents now belong to you. A clock museum. Mara almost laughed. Of course, Uncle Sebastian had owned a clock museum. That made perfect sense for the strange man who'd worn a pocket watch on a chain and had refused to use a cell phone. Is there any monetary value to it? She hated how desperate she sounded, but desperation had stopped being something she could hide months ago. Leonard's hesitation spoke volumes. The building is significant, historically designated. The collection itself is extensive, though the market for antique timepieces has been challenging in recent years. I should mention that the museum hasn't been open to the public in over a decade. Your uncle became increasingly reclusive. There are structural concerns with the building, and property taxes are in arrears. Of course they were, because nothing in Mara's life could ever be simple. Still, a building was a building. Even a dilapidated clock museum had to be worth something. How much in taxes? Approximately $18,000. Mara's vision tunneled. $18,000 might as well have been $18 million. She had $127 in her checking account. There's a small balance remaining in your uncle's account. Leonard continued quickly, as if sensing her despair. Enough for bus tickets and basic supplies if you need temporary accommodation while sorting affairs. The museum has living quarters on the 3rd floor. Your uncle resided there. They're rustic but habitable. Mara looked around the apartment she was losing anyway. Looked at Ivy, who'd gone back to coloring at the kitchen table with the intense, focused children used to pretend they weren't listening to adult conversations that would determine their futures. Can you wire the money today? Of course. I'll also email the deed documents and keys to the museum. There's a letter your uncle left for you as well. Specific instructions about. Another pause. Well, he wanted you to read it yourself. After the call ended, Mara sat at the kitchen table across from Ivy. Her daughter had been drawing clocks, dozens of them, covering the page in circles with numbers and hands pointing to random times. The symbolism wasn't lost on Mara. Honey, how would you feel about a trip? Ivy looked up, crayon pausing mid-stroke. Like vacation? Sort of. We're going to visit a museum that belonged to great Uncle Sebastian. It's full of clocks. Old ones from all over the world. The weird uncle? Ivy's honesty was brutal and perfect. Yeah, the weird uncle. Mara managed to smile. He left the museum to us. We might stay there for a little while. Instead of here. Ivy considered this with the seriousness she brought to most decisions. Then, can I bring Mr. Whiskers? Her stuffed cat, worn nearly threadbare from years of love. Of course. Okay then. The wire transfer arrived within 2 hours. $847. After bus tickets to Millbrook and basic supplies, Mara would have maybe $200 left. She spent the evening packing their lives into 4 suitcases and 2 backpacks. Everything else, the furniture, the kitchen supplies, the small TV, she left behind. Let the landlord sell it to cover what she owed. Leonard's email contained a scanned letter in her uncle's spidery handwriting. Mara read it 3 times, trying to decode meaning from what seemed like the ramblings of an isolated old man. Dear Mara, if you're reading this, I've departed and you've found your way to the Temporal Museum. Good. Time is a circle, not a line, and what appears to be ending is merely beginning again. The museum contains more than clocks. It contains answers to questions you haven't thought to ask yet. The 3rd floor is yours. I've kept it ready. The 2nd floor holds the public collection. But the 1st floor, Mara, the 1st floor is where time stops and truth begins. Look for the perpetual paradox. When both hands point to midnight and the moon is dark, the gears turn backward. What was hidden becomes visible. What was locked becomes open. Your father knew. He tried to tell me I was wrong. Perhaps I was. Perhaps the price was too high. But the truth waits regardless. The museum is yours. What you find there is your choice. Uncle Sebastian. Ivy tugged at Mara's sleeve. What does it say? Mara folded the letter carefully. Uncle Sebastian wants us to solve a mystery. What kind of mystery? I don't know yet, baby, but we're going to find out. The Greyhound station smelled like diesel and desperation. Mara and Ivy boarded the 6 a.m. bus to Millbrook with their luggage, and Mr. Whiskers clutched in Ivy's arms. The journey would take 7 hours through Pennsylvania's mountainous interior, depositing them in a town Mara had never heard of before yesterday. As Philadelphia's skyline receded behind them, Ivy pressed her face to the window. Mom, when we get there, will we have to leave again? The question pierced Mara's chest. This was what instability did to children. Taught them that nowhere was permanent, that everything was temporary, that even home was just another word for the place you'd eventually lose. I don't know, Ivy, but wherever we go together. That's the only thing I can promise. Ivy's small hand found hers. That's the important thing. The Pennsylvania landscape transformed gradually from urban sprawl to rolling hills to genuine mountains. Forests pressed close to the highway, dense and dark even in midday light. Small towns appeared and disappeared, each one looking slightly more forgotten than the last. Millbrook emerged from the wilderness like something from a folktale. The town clung to the side of a steep valley, old brick buildings stacked on top of each other in defiance of gravity. A river ran through the center, spanned by an iron bridge that looked Victorian in origin. Population sign, 2,847. The bus station was a single bench outside a shuttered gas station. No one else disembarked. As the bus pulled away, Mara experienced the profound isolation of being somewhere utterly unfamiliar with no clear plan for what came next. Leonard had provided the museum's address, 47 Chrono Street, at the top of the town's steepest hill. Mara shouldered 2 suitcases while Ivy managed her backpack and Mr. Whiskers. The climb was brutal, each step requiring determination, fueled by the knowledge that there was literally nowhere else to go. Chrono Street was narrow, cobblestoned, lined with buildings that predated indoor plumbing. Most stood empty, windows dark with vacancy. At the very top, dominating the street like a Victorian monument to obsession, stood the Temporal Museum of Mechanized Horology. Mara stopped, breath-catching. The building was 3 stories of red brick and limestone, with a mansard roof studded with dormer windows. A tower rose from one corner, its spire topped with a massive clock face that had stopped at 11:47, either a.m. or p.m., impossible to say. The architecture was ornate, almost Gothic, with carved stone lintels above each window, depicting various timepieces. But it was also clearly dying. Paint peeled from window frames. Several panes were cracked or missing entirely. The front steps sagged ominously. Ivy clutched Mara's hand as they approached. "It looks like a haunted house." "It looks like our house," Mara corrected, pulling out the keys Leonard had sent. "At least for now." The front door was solid oak, 12 feet tall, with a brass knocker shaped like an hourglass. The lock was ancient, requiring Mara to jiggle the key for several minutes before the mechanism finally yielded. The door swung inward with a groan that echoed through what sounded like vast interior space. The smell hit first: dust, old paper, machine oil, and something metallic underneath. Not decay exactly, but the particular scent of time concentrated in one place. Mara found a light switch. Nothing happened. "Electricity's probably shut off," she muttered, pulling out her phone to use as a flashlight. The beam revealed wonders. They stood in an entrance hall that rose 2 stories, its walls lined floor to ceiling with clocks. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. Grandfather clocks stood like sentries. Wall clocks created a mosaic of faces showing different times. Glass cases held pocket watches arranged in precise rows. Cuckoo clocks dangled from ceiling hooks. Carriage clocks perched on every available surface. All of them silent. All of them stopped at different times, as if each had given up at its own individual moment of surrender. Ivy's voice was barely a whisper. "Why aren't they ticking?" "No power, probably. They need winding or batteries." But even as Mara said it, she felt the wrongness of the silence. A clock museum should tick, should chime, should pulse with the rhythm of time being measured and marked. This silence felt deliberate, pregnant with meaning she couldn't grasp. They moved deeper into the first floor. The museum's layout was labyrinthine, rooms branching off rooms, each one dedicated to different eras or styles of timepieces. Renaissance astronomical clocks shared space with Art Deco wall pieces. Maritime chronometers sat beside ornate French mantel clocks. Every surface held timepieces in various states of repair. In what appeared to be a workshop area, tools lay scattered across a massive wooden bench. Gears and springs in labeled boxes. Half-disassembled clocks frozen mid-repair, as if Uncle Sebastian had simply stopped working one day and never returned. A spiral staircase at the building's center led upward. Mara and Ivy climbed to the second floor, which proved even more overwhelming than the first. Here, the displays were more formal, arranged museum-style with placards providing historical context. But years of neglect had taken their toll. Dust coated everything. Water stains mapped the ceiling. Several display cases had cracked glass. The third floor was domestic space, confirming Leonard's description. A kitchen with ancient appliances. A bathroom with fixtures that probably predated World War II. 2 bedrooms, one clearly Sebastian's, spartanly furnished with a single bed and dresser, and one that appeared untouched, as if prepared for a guest who'd never arrived. The guest room held a 4-poster bed with a faded quilt, a small desk, and a bookshelf empty except for a single object. A music box shaped like a carousel, its horses frozen mid-gallop. Ivy went straight to it. "Can I wind it?" "Careful. It's probably fragile." Ivy turned the key on the bottom. The mechanism caught, and tinny music filled the room, a waltz delicate and slightly out of tune. The horses rotated slowly, their paint chipped but still showing traces of gold and crimson. Mara felt tears burn her eyes without understanding why. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe relief at having walls around them again, even walls that seemed ready to collapse. Maybe the haunting beauty of this strange inheritance that felt more like curse than blessing. She opened a room's single window, letting in evening air that smelled of pine and approaching rain. The view looked down over Millbrook's compact downtown, its buildings illuminated by streetlights clicking on against gathering dusk. Beyond the town, mountains rose in layered silhouettes. "We can sleep here tonight," Mara said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." They ate dinner from the supplies Mara had bought: crackers, cheese, apples. No electricity meant no refrigeration, so they'd live on non-perishables until Mara could navigate the utility companies, if she could even afford to turn the power back on. After Ivy fell asleep clutching Mr. Whiskers, Mara returned to the first floor with her phone flashlight. Uncle Sebastian's letter had mentioned the first floor specifically, where time stops and truth begins. Look for the perpetual paradox. She searched methodically, reading placard after placard. Most provided straightforward information: maker, date, origin, mechanical specifications. But in the workshop area, she found something different. A glass case set apart from the others, elevated on a marble pedestal. Inside sat a clock unlike any she'd seen. It was roughly 2 feet tall, constructed of brass and crystal, with multiple dials showing phases of the moon, planetary positions, and times in different cities. But what made it extraordinary was its construction. Dozens of visible gears, all interlocking in patterns that seemed to defy physics. Some gears appeared to rotate in impossible directions. Others seemed to pass through each other without touching. The placard read, "The Perpetual Paradox. Maker unknown. Acquired 1982. Mechanical impossibility that nevertheless functions. When both hands point to midnight and the moon is dark, the gears turn backward." Mara examined the clock carefully. Its hands currently showed 3:17. The moon phase dial indicated a waxing crescent. According to the description, she needed both hands at midnight during a new moon for what exactly? For the gears to turn backward? She pulled out her phone, checking the lunar calendar. The next new moon was in 6 days. The sound made her spin around. Footsteps on the floor above, directly over her head. Heavy, deliberate. Someone was in the museum. Mara's heart hammered as she killed her phone light and pressed herself against the wall. The footsteps moved across the 3rd floor, paused, then descended the spiral staircase. She could hear breathing now. One person, moving with purpose through the 2nd floor. Then a voice, male, older. "I know you're here. I saw the lights." Mara stayed frozen. The footsteps approached the 1st floor. "Miss Hendricks? I'm not here to hurt you. I'm Arthur Pemberton. I was your uncle's friend." Slowly, Mara turned her phone light back on, revealing an elderly man standing at the base of the stairs. He was perhaps 70, white-haired, wearing an old-fashioned 3-piece suit and carrying an antique doctor's bag. "How did you get in?" "I have a key. Sebastian gave it to me years ago. I've been maintaining the place since he died, checking for leaks, making sure nothing valuable gets stolen." Arthur held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I apologize for frightening you. I saw light through the windows and thought perhaps vandals had broken in." Mara's grip on her phone remained tight. "You've been taking care of the museum?" "As best I could. Sebastian was my closest friend for 40 years. This place was his life's work. I couldn't let it fall into complete ruin." Arthur looked around with visible sadness. "Though I'm fighting a losing battle. The building needs serious repairs. The collection requires constant maintenance." Without Sebastian's knowledge, he trailed off. "What did my uncle do here? I mean, besides collect clocks?" Arthur's expression shifted, something guarded replacing the earlier openness. "He studied time, not just its measurement, but its nature." Sebastian believed clocks weren't merely devices for telling time. He thought they could manipulate it under the right circumstances. Mara felt a chill despite the stuffy air. Manipulate time? Like science fiction. Like theoretical physics meeting mechanical engineering. "Your uncle was brilliant, Ms. Hendricks. Eccentric, certainly. Obsessive, undoubtedly. But brilliant." Arthur moved closer to the perpetual paradox, his weathered face illuminated by Mara's phone light. This was his masterwork, or rather, his obsession. He spent 2 decades trying to unlock its secret. The letter he left me mentioned it. Said when both hands point to midnight during a new moon, the gears turn backward. What does that mean? Arthur's hesitation stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Finally, your father didn't tell you anything about Sebastian's work? My father barely spoke to Sebastian. They had some kind of falling out before I was born. Yes, they did. Arthur pulled out a pocket watch, checking it despite the darkness. I should go. You're exhausted, and we can talk more tomorrow. But Ms. Hendricks, Mara, if you stay in Millbrook, there are people who won't be happy about it. People who want this building and everything in it. They'll pressure you to sell. My advice? Don't make any quick decisions. He left through the front door, locking it from the outside, leaving Mara alone with thousands of silent clocks and more questions than she'd arrived with. She climbed back to the third floor, checking on Ivy, still sleeping peacefully, before collapsing onto the guest bed fully clothed. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of gears turning in impossible directions and clocks ticking backward toward moments already past. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through dirty windows and Ivy's excited voice. Mom, there's a whole library of clock books. Mara found her daughter in a room she'd missed the previous night, a small library lined with technical manuals, historical texts, and leather-bound journals. Ivy had pulled down a volume titled Temporal Mechanics for the Practical Horologist and was studying diagrams she couldn't possibly understand. Breakfast first, then we explore more. They just finished eating when knocking echoed through the museum. Mara descended to find a woman in an expensive pantsuit standing on the front steps. Mid-40s, blonde hair in a severe bun, carrying a leather portfolio. Ms. Hendricks? I'm Victoria Grayson, with Mountain Heritage Realty. She extended a business card through the partially open door. I wanted to welcome you to Millbrook and discuss opportunities regarding your property. I just arrived yesterday. Of course. But I imagine you're already recognizing the challenges of maintaining a building this size, particularly one with significant structural issues and tax obligations. Victoria's smile was practiced, professional. I represent several interested buyers who would take the property as is. You wouldn't have to worry about repairs or back taxes. Who are these buyers? A development group looking to preserve Millbrook's historical character while bringing modern amenities. They're quite passionate about adaptive reuse of vintage buildings. Translation: they'd gut the museum and turn it into condos or a boutique hotel. Mara had seen enough gentrification in Philadelphia to recognize the pattern. I'm not interested in selling. Victoria's smile never wavered. I understand. This is overwhelming. But consider, you have a 7-year-old daughter. Winter here is harsh. This building has no heat, unreliable electricity, probable mold issues. Is that really the environment you want for her? The implied threat, the suggestion that child welfare might become involved, landed with precision. Mara's hand tightened on the doorframe. Thank you for stopping by, but we're fine. After Victoria left, Mara found Ivy on the second floor, standing in front of a display case filled with pocket watches. The child's face was pressed against the glass, her breath fogging the surface. Mom, this one has my birthday on it. Mara moved closer. The watch Ivy indicated was silver, ornately engraved, with a dial showing not just time but date. And indeed, the date window showed March 15th, Ivy's birthday. That's just coincidence, honey. But look, there's more. Ivy pointed to other watches. One showed December 3rd, Mara's birthday. Another showed July 22nd, the date Mara's father had died. A fourth showed the previous Tuesday, the day they received the eviction notice. Mara's skin prickled. Coincidence? Or had Uncle Sebastian arranged this display, knowing they'd eventually see it? A sound from the first floor made them both freeze. Footsteps. Not Arthur's careful tread from last night. These were heavier, multiplied. Several people moving through the museum. Mara grabbed Ivy's hand. Stay quiet. They descended the spiral staircase, slowly. On the first floor, 3 men stood examining the perpetual paradox. 2 wore work clothes, contractors probably. The third was dressed more formally, 50-ish, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He looked up, as Mara appeared. "Ms. Hendricks, I apologize for the intrusion. I'm Mayor Harrison Reed. These are building inspectors from the county. We're here to assess the structural integrity of the museum. You can't just walk into my property. Actually, we can. The building is on the historic registry, which grants us oversight authority. And given the tax situation, the county has legitimate interest in ensuring public safety." Harrison pulled out official-looking documents. "We've received complaints about the building's condition. Cracked foundation, roof damage, potential asbestos. If the structure is deemed uninhabitable, the county can seize it for back taxes and demolish it." One of the inspectors was taking photographs. The other was making notes on a tablet, periodically shaking his head as if documenting disaster. Ivy pressed against Mara's leg, her small body trembling. Mara forced herself to speak calmly despite the rage building in her chest. "How long will this take?" "A few hours. You're welcome to stay or return later." Harrison's tone was dismissive, as if she were barely relevant to proceedings determining her future. They left, walking down the steep hill into Millbrook's compact downtown. Ivy was silent until they reached a small diner advertising breakfast all day. Inside, they slid into a corner booth. A waitress appeared, elderly, name tag reading Helen, and poured coffee without asking. "You're Sebastian's niece." "Not a question. News travels fast. Small town. Everyone knows everything." Helen pulled out her order pad. "You planning to stay?" "I don't know yet." "Good answer. Truth is, Millbrook's dying. Young people leave soon as they can. Buildings stand empty. If you got sense, you'll sell that museum to Grayson Development and get out while you can." "Grayson Development?" Victoria said she represented buyers. She didn't mention her company. Helen's expression hardened. "Victoria's married to the mayor's son. Grayson Development is run by her father. They've been trying to acquire that museum for 20 years. Your uncle refused every offer. Drove them crazy." After Helen took their order and left, Mara pulled out her phone, searching for information about Grayson Development. The company specialized in historical property acquisition and adaptive reuse, buying old buildings in struggling towns, converting them to high-end purposes that attracted wealthier residents. The pattern was clear. Buy low in economically depressed areas, renovate, rebrand, profit from increased property values while pricing out original residents. Their food arrived. As they ate, Arthur Pemberton entered the diner, spotting them immediately and approaching with the careful hesitation of someone unsure of their welcome. "May I join you?" Mara gestured to the empty side of the booth. Arthur slid in, ordering tea from Helen with obvious familiarity. "The inspectors are at the museum," Mara said. "I know. Harrison called me this morning, asking about the building's condition. I told him the truth. It needs work, but it's structurally sound. Built in 1887 by craftsmen who understood permanence." Arthur's tea arrived. He added sugar with precise movements. "They'll find violations anyway. That's the point. So what am I supposed to do? Fight or sell? Those are your options." Arthur met her eyes. "Sebastian chose you as his heir for a reason. He could have left the museum to me. I offered to take it multiple times. He refused, said it needed to go to family. Specifically to you." "Why me? I barely knew him." "Because you're your father's daughter, and your father was the only person Sebastian ever trusted with the truth about what's hidden in that building." Mara set down her fork carefully. "What truth?" Arthur glanced at Ivy, who was focused on her pancakes and seemed not to be listening. He lowered his voice anyway. "Not here. Tonight, after your daughter's asleep. I'll tell you everything Sebastian told me. But understand, once you know, you can't unknown it. And people have died protecting it." That evening, after Ivy fell asleep clutching Mr. Whiskers, Mara descended to the first floor where Arthur waited beside the perpetual paradox. He brought a battery-powered lantern that cast long shadows across the workshop area. "Your Uncle Sebastian and I met in 1977. Arthur began without preamble. "I was a watchmaker then, running a small repair shop in Pittsburgh. Sebastian came in with a clock he'd found at an estate sale, a peculiar piece with mechanisms I'd never seen before. We spent 3 hours examining it together, and by the end, we were friends. Arthur settled onto a wooden stool, his weathered hands resting on his knees. Sebastian was obsessed with time, not just measuring it, but understanding its nature. He believed certain mechanical devices, if constructed with precise specifications, could interact with time in ways modern physics was only beginning to theorize. That sounds like science fiction. It sounds like madness, Arthur corrected gently. That's what your father thought. Robert was a physicist. Did you know that? Mara shook her head. Her father had worked in insurance claims for as long as she could remember. The idea of him as a physicist seemed absurd. He had his doctorate from MIT, specialized in theoretical physics, temporal mechanics specifically. He and Sebastian were close growing up, despite the age difference. When Sebastian started collecting unusual timepieces in the late 1970s, Robert helped him understand the mathematical principles behind what Sebastian was discovering. Arthur stood, moving to the perpetual paradox. This clock came into Sebastian's possession in 1982. He bought it from a dealer in Prague who claimed it had been constructed by a Bavarian clockmaker named Ernst Richter in 1887. The same year this museum building was constructed, incidentally. You think that's significant? I think nothing about Sebastian's collection was accidental. Arthur's fingers traced the glass case without touching it. Ernst Richter was a genius and possibly insane. He believed time wasn't linear, that past, present, and future existed simultaneously, and that certain mechanical devices could access different temporal states. The perpetual paradox was his proof. Mara studied the clock more carefully. In the lantern light, its brass gears seemed to shimmer with their own internal luminescence. What does it do? According to Richter's notes, which Sebastian acquired separately, the clock creates what he called a temporal window. When properly activated, both hands at midnight during a new moon, the gears reverse. And when they reverse, they unlock access to. Arthur paused, choosing his words carefully. To something hidden, something that exists in a different temporal state than our current moment. You're saying it's a time machine. I'm saying it's a key. A very specific key to a very specific lock. Arthur pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. This is the last letter Sebastian wrote me, 3 days before he died. He knew his heart was failing. Knew he didn't have much time left. Mara took the letter, reading by lantern light. Arthur, if you're reading this, I've crossed over and Mara hasn't come yet. Wait for her. She'll come when she has nowhere else to go. That's how these things work. Time is a circle. I never told her father about the vault. The fight we had in 1985 destroyed our relationship, and I couldn't repair it. Robert thought I was risking too much, that some secrets should stay buried. He was probably right, but I spent 40 years protecting what's down there, and I can't take it with me. The new moon on March 21st is the key. The perpetual paradox will unlock the temporal vault if Mara has the courage to activate it. Inside, she'll find proof of what Richter discovered, and why people have died to keep it hidden. Tell her everything. She deserves to know what she's inherited. Sebastian. Mara's hands trembled as she folded the letter. A temporal vault? What does that even mean? It means there's a chamber beneath this building that exists slightly outside normal time. A space that was sealed in 1887 using principles of temporal mechanics that we still don't fully understand. Sebastian spent decades trying to access it. He finally succeeded in 1985, opened it once, and then sealed it again after your father discovered what he'd done. What was inside? Arthur's expression grew grave. I don't know. Sebastian never told me. But whatever he found terrified your father enough to cut off all contact. And it convinced Sebastian to spend the rest of his life protecting this museum, making sure no one else could access the vault until the right moment, the right person. And he thought I was the right person? Why? Because you're Robert's daughter. You have his mind, his integrity. And because you're desperate enough to take risks that comfortable people won't. Arthur met her eyes. Sebastian knew you'd come here when you'd lost everything. When you had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. That's when people find the courage to face truths that can't be undone. A sound from above made them both freeze. Footsteps on the third floor, directly over their heads. Mara's breath caught. Ivy. But the footsteps were too heavy, too deliberate. Someone else was in the museum. Arthur moved with surprising speed for his age, positioning himself between Mara and the spiral staircase. The footsteps descended, slow and purposeful. A figure emerged from the shadows. Male, 50s, wearing dark clothes and carrying something that glinted metallically in the lantern light. "Step away from the case, Arthur." Arthur's voice came out flat, resigned. "James, I wondered when you'd show up." The man called James descended the final stairs, revealing himself fully in the lantern light. He bore a striking resemblance to Mayor Harrison Reed. Same build, same features, but 20 years younger. He carried a crowbar. "Who are you?" Mara demanded, moving toward the staircase, thinking of Ivy sleeping upstairs. "James Reed, the mayor's nephew. Though that's not really relevant." James approached the perpetual paradox with focused intensity. "What's relevant is that my family has been watching this museum for 37 years, waiting for Sebastian to die so we could finally access what he was protecting." "Your family?" Mara's mind raced, connecting pieces. "Grayson Development. Victoria Grayson married to the mayor's son. You're all connected. The Reed and Grayson families have been intertwined for generations. We've controlled Millbrook's development since the 1950s. James positioned the crowbar against the perpetual paradox's case. "We tried buying this building from Sebastian dozens of times. Offered him millions. He refused every offer, died practically penniless rather than give us access. Stubborn old fool." Arthur stepped forward. "Don't do this, James. You don't understand what you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly. Ernst Richter created something valuable enough that Sebastian spent 40 years protecting it. Something worth millions, probably. Maybe a revolutionary mechanical design. Maybe something historical that collectors would pay fortunes for." James raised the crowbar. "Whatever it is, it belongs to people who can actually use it, not some homeless woman squatting in a building she can't afford to maintain." He swung the crowbar. The glass case shattered with a sound like a scream. Mara lunged forward, but Arthur caught her arm, holding her back with surprising strength. James reached into the broken case, his hands closing around the perpetual paradox. The moment his skin made contact, the clock began to tick. Not forward, backward. The sound filled the museum, a rhythmic ticking that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The perpetual paradox's gears began rotating, but in reverse, moving counterclockwise with mechanical precision that defied the fact that no one had wound the mechanism. James stumbled backward, the clock still in his hands, his face gone pale. "What the?" The other clocks woke up. All of them. Every timepiece in the museum began ticking simultaneously, a cacophony of mechanical rhythm that built from whisper to roar. Grandfather clocks, wall clocks, pocket watches, carriage clocks. Thousands of devices activating in unison, their collective sound creating a pressure that Mara felt in her chest. And they were all running backward. James dropped the perpetual paradox. It hit the floor, but didn't shatter. Instead, it landed upright, perfectly balanced, its gears still turning in reverse. The floor beneath it began to glow. Not metaphorically. The wooden floorboards where the perpetual paradox sat emitted a faint phosphorescent light that spread outward in geometric patterns. Lines connecting to form a perfect circle, 12 feet in diameter, with the clock at its center. Arthur grabbed Mara's arm, pulling her back from the expanding circle. "It's opening. The vault is opening." The floorboards within the circle began to descend, moving smoothly downward as if on hydraulic lift, though no modern mechanism could account for the motion. The perpetual paradox descended with them, still ticking backward, its light growing brighter. James stood frozen at the circle's edge, staring down into the opening shaft. Mara could see stone steps spiraling down into darkness, illuminated by the same phosphorescent glow emanating from the clock. "My God," James whispered. "It's real. It's actually real." He stepped onto the descending platform. "No!" Arthur lunged forward, but too late. James disappeared down the shaft, following the stairs into whatever lay beneath the museum. The platform continued descending for another 10 seconds, then stopped. The ticking continued, all the museum's clocks maintaining their backward rhythm. The phosphorescent light pulsed gently from the depths. Mara moved to the edge of the shaft, peering down. The stairs descended perhaps 30 feet into a chamber she couldn't fully see. But she could hear James down there, his voice echoing up with a quality that sounded wrong. Too hollow, too distant, as if he were speaking from much farther away than 30 feet. There's something down here. Boxes. Equipment. Papers. Oh God, there's so much. His voice cut off abruptly. Arthur and Mara waited, listening. The clocks continued their backward rhythm. No sound came from below. James! Arthur called down. Can you hear me? Silence. Then, slowly, James emerged from the stairwell. But something about him had changed. His movements were jerky, uncertain, like a puppet whose strings were tangled. His face was slack, eyes wide and unfocused. He climbed the stairs mechanically, reaching the museum floor and stepping off the circular platform. The moment his foot touched regular floorboards outside the circle, he collapsed. Arthur rushed him, checking for pulse. He's alive. Heart rate is extremely slow, but steady. He looked up at Mara. What did you see down there, James? What's in the vault? James's eyes focused slowly, pupils dilating and contracting as if adjusting to light that wasn't there. When he spoke, his voice sounded distant, disconnected. Time. I saw time. All of it. Past and present and future, all happening at once. I saw myself being born. Saw myself dying. Saw Millbrook being built and Millbrook crumbling. Saw, he convulsed, gasping. Too much. Can't hold it all. Can't. His eyes rolled back. He lost consciousness. The clock stopped ticking. All at once, complete silence fell over the museum. The perpetual paradox sat at the bottom of the shaft, still glowing faintly, but motionless now. The circular platform remained lowered, stairs still accessible. Mara stared down into the vault, her heart hammering. Whatever was down there had broken James Reed's mind in less than a minute. We need to get him out of here, Arthur said, checking James's pulse again. Get him to a hospital. And tell them what? That he broke in my museum, smashed an antique clock, and fell into a temporal vault that showed him all of time simultaneously. Mara's voice came out sharper than intended. They'll think we're all insane. Mara! No. Look at him, Arthur. Whatever he saw down there destroyed something in his brain. If we take him to a hospital, there will be questions. Police. Investigations. And that vault will be discovered by people who won't hesitate to exploit whatever's down there. Arthur's face was grim, but he nodded slowly. What do you suggest? We close it. Reset the clock. Whatever Sebastian protected for 40 years, we protect now. You don't even know what's down there. Neither do you. But you said Sebastian opened it once and immediately sealed it again. That he and my father fought about it. That people have died protecting this secret. Mara looked down at the vault. I trust my uncle's judgment more than I trust whatever's happening in this town. She descended the spiral staircase to the shaft's edge, peering down at the perpetual paradox. Its gears had stopped, frozen in whatever position they'd reached when the vault opened. According to the letter, it needed both hands at midnight during a new moon to activate. But how to deactivate it? Mara carefully stepped onto the circular platform. The stone beneath her feet felt solid, but somehow insubstantial, as if it existed in multiple states simultaneously. The sensation made her dizzy. She knelt beside the perpetual paradox, examining its face more carefully. The hand showed 11:47, the same time displayed on the tower clock outside. Was that significant? Had both clocks stopped at the same moment? Behind the main dial, visible through the crystal face, the gears continued their impossible patterns. Some rotated right, some left, some passed through others without touching. But now she noticed something new, a small panel on the clock's base, previously hidden by the case's positioning. Mara opened the panel carefully. Inside was a keyhole and a tiny placard with handwritten text, temporal lock. To seal, advance hands to midnight. To open, retreat hands to midnight. She looked around the vault chamber for something to use as a key. The phosphorescent light revealed more details now. The walls were carved with intricate patterns depicting phases of the moon, planetary orbits, complex mathematical formulas. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a temple to temporal mechanics. Wooden crates lined the walls, their surfaces covered with dust that seemed to glow in the strange light. Labels on the nearest crates read, Richter Documents 1887, Temporal Research 1885 to 1887, Correspondence, Confidential. Whatever Ernst Richter had discovered, whatever he'd hidden here, it was extensive. Mara reached toward one of the crates, her fingers inches from the wood. The air around her hand shimmered, like heat distortion, and she felt a pulling sensation, as if something in the crate was trying to draw her closer. She jerked her hand back, heart pounding. Arthur had said the vault existed slightly outside normal time. Touching objects in that state might be dangerous. Instead, she focused on the perpetual paradox. The keyhole suggested there was a specific key somewhere. But where? A sound from above made her look up. Ivy's voice frightened, Mom? Mom, where are you? Mara's stomach dropped. Her daughter had woken up, was coming down the spiral staircase, and would see the open vault, the unconscious man, the impossible mechanisms. Stay there, baby. Don't come down. But Ivy had already descended far enough to see into the first floor. The child froze on the stairs, eyes wide, taking in the broken case, James's unconscious form, the glowing shaft. What's happening? Why are all the clocks stopped at different times? Why is that man sleeping on the floor? Arthur moved to intercept Ivy, his voice gentle. Your mother is handling something important, Ivy. Why don't you? And I go upstairs and I'll explain. No. Ivy pushed past him with surprising determination for a 7-year-old. She descended the remaining stairs and walked directly to the vault's edge, peering down at Mara with an expression far too serious for her age. Great Uncle Sebastian visited me in my dream last night. He said you need my help. Mara's breath caught. Honey, you just had a regular dream. He showed me a pocket watch. Silver, with roses carved on it. He said when the time comes, give Mom the watch. It's the key to everything. Ivy reached in her pajama pocket and pulled out something that made Mara's heart stop. A silver pocket watch, ornately engraved with roses. Where did you get that? It was on my nightstand when I woke up, next to Mr. Whiskers. Ivy held it out toward the vault. Great Uncle Sebastian said you'd know what to do with it. Mara climbed carefully out of the vault, taking the watch from her daughter's small hand. The metal was warm, as if recently held. The engraving was exquisite, roses intertwined with clockwork gears, the petals seeming to move in the lantern light. She opened the watch case. Inside, instead of a normal clock face, there was a single gear mechanism and a small key on a chain. The key was tiny, delicate, with teeth that matched the keyhole on the perpetual paradox perfectly. How is this possible? Mara whispered. Arthur's face had gone pale. Sebastian told me he'd hidden the temporal key somewhere safe, somewhere the Reeds and Graysons could never find it. I assumed he meant a safety deposit box or a secret compartment in the building. But if he left it in a temporal loop, placed it in your daughter's room using the vault's properties before he died, that's impossible. That's time travel. Actual time travel. No, it's temporal placement. Moving objects through different time states to specific coordinates. Arthur gestured at the vault. That's what this chamber does, Mara. It doesn't just exist outside normal time. It allows interaction with different temporal states. Sebastian could have accessed a future moment when you and Ivy would be here, place the watch in her room, and return to his own present. From his perspective, it would have taken minutes. From yours, it's been months since he died. Mara's head spun with implications she couldn't process. But Ivy was watching her with absolute trust, believing whatever impossible thing was happening made perfect sense because Great Uncle Sebastian had promised it would. Okay, Mara said, forcing her voice steady. Okay, we close the vault, and we figure out what to do next. She descended back into the shaft, approaching the perpetual paradox with the tiny key. It fit the lock perfectly. She turned it gently, feeling mechanisms engage within the clock's housing. The hands began moving forward. Not the jerky movement of broken clockwork, but smooth, purposeful progression. They swept from 11:47 toward midnight, accelerating as they approached 12. When both hands pointed straight up, the gears reversed again, this time moving clockwise forward in time. The platform began ascending, carrying Mara and the perpetual paradox back to the museum floor level. The circular opening closed beneath her, floorboards sliding back into place with perfect precision, leaving no visible seam. The phosphorescent light faded. Within seconds, the floor looked exactly as it had before. Old wood, worn smooth by decades of foot traffic, showing no evidence of the impossible chamber below. The perpetual paradox went silent, its hands frozen at midnight. Mara stepped off the now solid floor, the pocket watch still in her hand. James Reed remained unconscious, his breathing shallow but steady. Ivy stood beside Arthur, watching everything with the solemn attention of a child who understood this was important even if she couldn't grasp all the details. "What do we do with him?" Arthur asked, gesturing at James. "We call his uncle. Tell him James broke in and collapsed. Medical emergency, no details about what he was trying to steal." Mara met Arthur's eyes. "And then we figure out how to protect this place from everyone who's going to come looking for what's down there." Arthur pulled out his cell phone, dialing with hands that trembled slightly. While he spoke to the mayor in low, urgent tones, Mara knelt beside her daughter. "Ivy, baby, I need you to listen carefully. What happened tonight? What you saw? You can't tell anyone about it. Not your friends, not teachers, not the police if they ask questions. Can you do that?" Ivy nodded solemnly. "Great Uncle Sebastian said, keeping secrets is like keeping time. You have to protect it carefully or it gets lost. He told you that in the dream. He told me lots of things. He said you'd be scared, but that's okay because scared means you understand something's important. He said brave people are scared all the time. They just don't let the scared stop them from doing what's right." Mara pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the small, solid reality of her child's body against her own. Whatever impossible things were happening, whatever secrets lay in the vault beneath this building, Ivy was real. Protecting her mattered more than anything else. Sirens approached from down the hill. Ambulance, and from the sound of it, police cars. The mayor was bringing official witnesses, probably hoping to use James's condition as leverage to force Mara out of the museum. Arthur ended his call. "Harrison's coming with the paramedics." He sounded suspicious, kept asking what James was doing here, why we didn't call immediately. Let him be suspicious. James broke in, collapsed. We're victims, not suspects. But even as Mara said it, she recognized the flaw. The broken display case. The shattered glass around the perpetual paradox's pedestal. That would raise questions. She looked at the clock, now sitting on the floor amidst broken glass. Its hands at midnight, its gears still. An idea formed. "Arthur, help me move this back into the case. We'll say James smashed it trying to steal it, that he grabbed the clock and it shocked him somehow. Electrical discharge from old mechanisms. Knocked him unconscious before he could run." They worked quickly, carefully placing the perpetual paradox back on its pedestal inside the broken case. The position wasn't perfect. Glass shards made proper placement impossible, but it created a plausible narrative. Attempted theft interrupted by unexpected electrical discharge. The sirens grew louder, stopping outside. Heavy footsteps on the front stairs, then pounding on the locked door. Mara opened it to find Mayor Harrison Reed flanked by 2 paramedics and a state police officer. Harrison's face was a mask of controlled fury. "Where's my nephew?" "Inside. He broke in through a window upstairs, came down here, smashed that display case, trying to steal the clock inside. Something in the mechanism shocked him. He collapsed before we could stop him." Harrison pushed past her, the paramedics following. They surrounded James, checking vital signs, asking questions Mara answered with practiced vagueness. Yes, she'd heard glass breaking. No, she hadn't seen exactly what happened. James had been unconscious when she arrived. The state police officer, name tag reading Kowalski, examined the broken case with professional interest. "This clock is valuable. According to my uncle's records, it's worth approximately $150,000. Very rare, very old." Mara had no idea if that was true, but it needed to sound plausible. "And your nephew knew about it?" Kowalski directed this question at Harrison. The mayor's jaw clenched. James has struggled with substance issues. If he was using again, he might have thought he could sell it for drug money. The lie was transparent, protecting family reputation by painting James as an addict rather than admitting the Reeds had been surveilling the museum. But it served Mara's purposes, so she didn't contradict it. The paramedics were loading James onto a stretcher. His eyes had opened, but remained unfocused, pupils dilated irregularly. When Harrison spoke to him, James didn't respond, just stared at nothing, lips moving soundlessly. Is he on drugs? One paramedic asked. I don't know, Harrison said. Just get him to the hospital. As they carried James out, Kowalski continued examining the scene. He photographed the broken case, bagged a few glass shards, took statements from Mara and Arthur about the timeline of events. You're staying here? Kowalski asked Mara. In this building? It's my property. I inherited it from my uncle. Building inspectors were here yesterday. Filed a report saying the structure is unsafe for habitation. Then I'll make it safe. Hire contractors, fix the violations. Mara met his eyes steadily. Unless there's a law against living in a building I own. Kowalski's expression suggested he'd like there to be such a law. Building and safety codes exist for a reason, Ms. Hendricks. You have a young daughter. If conditions are genuinely unsafe, Child Protective Services could get involved. The threat hung in the air between them. Mara felt Ivy's hand slip into hers, small fingers gripping tight. I understand. I'll address all code violations within the 30-day window the inspectors gave me. After Kowalski left, after the ambulance departed and the museum fell silent again, Mara sat on the floor beside the perpetual paradox, exhausted beyond words. Ivy curled up beside her, falling asleep almost immediately with the resilience of children who trusted adults to handle the impossible. Arthur settled onto a nearby stool. They'll be back. Harrison won't let this go. Whatever James saw in that vault, it convinced the mayor that something valuable is down there. He'll find legal ways to pressure you, building codes, tax liens, child endangerment allegations. So I fix the building. Pay the taxes somehow. Prove I can provide a safe home for Ivy. With what money? You told me you have almost nothing left. Mara pulled out her phone, searching for information about antique clock values. If the museum's collection was as extensive as it seemed, individual pieces might be worth thousands. Selling a few could fund repairs and buy time. But as she scrolled through auction results, a different idea formed. What if we opened the museum, actually operated it as a functioning business? Arthur looked skeptical. Millbrook gets maybe 100 tourists a year. You'd never generate enough revenue to sustain this place. Not as a local attraction, as a destination. There are people who collect antique timepieces, who study horology, who travel to see a collection this comprehensive. Mara's mind raced, her graphic design background suddenly useful. We market it properly. Social media, specialty. Publications, partnerships with historical societies. The Temporal Museum of Mechanized Horology, featuring one of the world's largest private collections of rare timepieces. That would require significant capital. Marketing, restoration, compliance with museum operation regulations. We start small, document the collection online, create a virtual tour, build interest. Then approach grants and donors who fund historical preservation. Mara stood, energy returning despite her exhaustion. The building has historic designation. That qualifies us for preservation grants. And if we can prove the collection has genuine historical significance, it does. Sebastian spent 40 years proving it. He published papers, presented at conferences, corresponded with every major horological society in the world. Arthur's expression shifted from skeptical to cautiously hopeful. His research archives are in the third-floor library. Documentation of every piece in the collection, provenance records, historical analysis. It's scholarly work of the highest caliber. Then we use it. We turn this museum into exactly what Sebastian intended, a legitimate research institution and public resource. That makes us much harder to displace. Historic buildings with active educational missions get protections that abandoned properties don't. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Arthur had contacts in the horological community who'd be interested in Sebastian's research. Mara could leverage her design skills to create professional marketing materials. They'd need to address immediate building issues, heat, electricity, basic repairs, but those could be funded by selling a few lesser pieces from the collection. As dawn approached, Mara carried Ivy up to the third floor, tucking her daughter into the guest bed. The child murmured something about gears and roses, but didn't wake. Mara stood at the window, watching Millbrook emerge from darkness into morning light. Somewhere in the town below, Mayor Reed was learning that his nephew had suffered a catastrophic psychological break. That James kept muttering about seeing all of time at once, about past and future colliding, about truths too large for human minds to contain. They'd assumed drugs or mental illness. They'd never guessed the truth, that beneath this museum lay a chamber that could access different temporal states, that Ernst Richter had discovered something in 1887 that modern physics was only beginning to theorize. And they'd never know what was in those crates. What documents and research Richter had sealed away, what Sebastian had seen that made him spend 40 years protecting it from the world. Mara thought about her father, the physicist who'd fought with Sebastian after the vault opened in 1985. What had he seen that convinced him some secrets should stay buried? What was worth destroying a brotherly relationship to keep hidden? The pocket watch sat on the dresser beside Ivy's bed, its silver surface catching the morning light. Mara picked it up, opening the case to examine the key still attached to its chain. Such a tiny object to hold such enormous power. Sebastian had trusted her with this, had engineered a scenario where she'd arrive desperate enough to take risks, desperate enough to fight for something she didn't fully understand. He placed the key outside normal time, ensuring it would appear exactly when needed. That suggested he'd seen this moment coming, had known or calculated that Mara would end up homeless, jobless, with nowhere to go but Millbrook. Had he orchestrated it somehow, or simply observed it using the vault's temporal properties and prepared accordingly? The questions spiraled endlessly. Mara forced herself to stop, focusing on immediate priorities. Fix the building. Establish the museum as a legitimate operation. Protect the vault from discovery. Keep Ivy safe. Everything else could wait. Arthur appeared in the doorway. I'm going home to sleep for a few hours, then I'll return with my tools. We should start with the electrical system. At minimum, you need reliable power for heat and light. Arthur, why did Sebastian really leave this to me instead of you? The old man was quiet for a long moment. Because you have something to lose that I don't. A daughter to protect. Sebastian believed people fight harder when they're defending someone they love rather than just themselves. He needed someone who'd do whatever was necessary to keep the vault sealed. Someone who wouldn't be tempted to explore it, to use it, to profit from it. But you don't know what's down there. No, but I know Sebastian opened it once and immediately closed it again. I know he and your father, a brilliant physicist, both agreed it should remain sealed. I know James Reed spent less than a minute down there and emerged with his mind shattered. Arthur met her eyes. Some knowledge is too dangerous to possess, Mara. Some truths break the people who discover them. Your uncle understood that. I hope you do too. After Arthur left, Mara lay beside Ivy on the narrow bed, listening to her daughter's steady breathing. Through the window, she could see the museum's tower clock, still frozen at 11:47. The same time shown on the perpetual paradox when it sealed the vault. The same time Sebastian had died, according to the death certificate Leonard had sent. What had her uncle been doing at 11:47? Had he been trying to access the vault one final time? Or had he died knowing the key was already placed in Ivy's future, that everything was arranged, that all Mara needed to do was survive long enough to reach this moment? Sleep claimed her before she found answers. Her dreams were full of gears turning backward, of clocks showing impossible times, of her father's face, younger than she'd ever seen him, staring down into a vault filled with terrible light. She woke to Ivy shaking her shoulder, the child's voice urgent. Mom, there are people outside. Lots of them. Mara stumbled to the window. Below, at least 50 people had gathered on Chrono Street, many holding signs. She couldn't read them from this distance, but the crowd's energy felt hostile. Her phone buzzed with a text from Arthur. Grayson Development organized a protest, claiming museum is a safety hazard. News crews from 3 counties are there. Don't go outside. Too late. The doorbell rang, followed by heavy knocking. Mara descended to find Officer Kowalski on the front steps, looking uncomfortable. Ms. Hendricks, I need you to come with me. Why? I haven't done anything wrong. Child Protective Services has been contacted. Given the building code violations and last night's incident, they want Ivy placed in temporary protective custody until living conditions can be verified as safe. The words hit like physical blows. Mara's vision tunneled. You can't take my daughter. I'm not taking anyone. But CPS has legal authority in cases of potential child endangerment. You can cooperate now, or I can return with a court order. Behind Kowalski, Mara could see the crowd. See Victoria Grayson speaking to news cameras, her expression professionally concerned as she gestured toward the museum. See Mayor Reed standing beside his wife, nodding gravely at whatever narrative Victoria was constructing. They'd found the perfect pressure point. Threaten Ivy, force Mara to choose between fighting for the museum or protecting her daughter. Ivy appeared beside Mara, clutching Mr. Whiskers. I don't want to go with strangers. Kowalski's face softened. It's just temporary, honey. Just until we make sure your house is safe. Our house is safe. Great Uncle Sebastian built it to last forever. He told me in my dream. The officer's expression suggested he thought the child was confused or coached. He pulled out his radio, requesting backup. Mara's mind raced. If they took Ivy, the Reeds would have one. They'd use CPS investigations to delay any museum improvements, string out legal proceedings until Mara ran out of money and time. Then they'd seize the building for back taxes and tear it apart looking for the vault. She couldn't let that happen. Officer Kowalski, give me 24 hours. I'll have a contractor here this afternoon to address the immediate code violations. I'll get temporary power restored. I'll document everything for CPS to review. Ma'am, 24 hours. If conditions aren't improved by tomorrow morning, I'll cooperate fully with any placement recommendations. But please don't take my daughter based on allegations from people who've been trying to steal this property for decades. Kowalski hesitated, clearly torn between duty and recognition that Mara had a point. Finally, I'll talk to my supervisor. But you need to make real progress, Ms. Hendricks, not empty promises. After he left, Mara called Arthur. I need your contractor contacts. Everyone you know who can work today, right now. We're fixing this building immediately. Mara, that will cost thousands. I'll sell clocks. Whatever it takes. We're not losing Ivy. Within 2 hours, Arthur had assembled a crew of 5 men, all retired tradesmen who'd worked with Sebastian over the years. They descended on the museum with the focused efficiency of people who knew exactly what needed doing. Electrician Frank restored power to the 3rd floor, replacing corroded wiring that should have been updated decades ago. Roofer Miguel patched the most critical leaks. Carpenter Joseph reinforced sagging floor joists. Plumber Chun fixed the ancient heating system enough to provide baseline warmth. By late afternoon, the 3rd floor had functioning electricity, heat, and water. Not pretty, not permanent, but demonstrably safe for a child. Mara documented everything with her phone camera, creating a detailed record of improvements. She'd need this for CPS, for the building inspectors, for anyone who questioned her fitness as a parent or property owner. The work cost $4,200. Mara sold 3 antique pocket watches from the collection, carefully selecting pieces Arthur assured her were valuable but not irreplaceable. A dealer from Pittsburgh drove up the same afternoon, assessed the pieces, and paid cash on the spot. As the workers packed up their tools, Mara stood in the guest room, watching Ivy arrange her stuffed animals on the now-warm bed. The child seemed untroubled by the day's chaos, humming softly to herself as she positioned Mr. Whiskers just so. Mom, are they going to take me away? Mara knelt beside her daughter. No, baby. I won't let that happen. Good. Because Great Uncle Sebastian said, we have important work to do here. He said the museum needs us to protect it until the right time comes. The right time for what? Ivy's expression went solemn. far too serious for 7 years old. For the truth to come out. He said some truths have to wait until enough people are ready to believe them. Otherwise, they just hurt people and get buried again. Mara thought about James Reed, muttering about seeing all of time, his mind broken by 60 seconds in the temporal vault. About her father fighting with Sebastian after seeing what was down there. About Ernst Richter creating impossible mechanisms in 1887 for purposes she couldn't fathom. Maybe Ivy was right. Maybe some truths needed protection until the world was ready to receive them without shattering. The pocket watch sat on the dresser, its silver surface gleaming. Mara picked it up, running her thumb over the rose engravings. Somewhere beneath this building, sealed in a chamber outside normal time, lay answers to questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. But she'd protect those answers anyway. For Sebastian. For her father. For Ivy's future. For whatever truth waited in the darkness, counting down toward a moment only time itself could predict. Morning arrived with frost coating the museum's windows in crystalline patterns that resembled frozen gears. Mara awoke to find Ivy already dressed, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by Sebastian's journals, her small fingers tracing diagrams she couldn't possibly understand. "Baby, those are very old. We need to be careful with them. Great-Uncle Sebastian says I should read them. He says kids see things adults miss because we don't know yet what's supposed to be impossible." Ivy held up a page covered in mathematical formulas and sketches of clock mechanisms. "See? This clock has gears that go sideways instead of round. That's silly, right? Except he built it, and it worked." Mara took the journal carefully. The page showed designs for something called a lateral temporal oscillator, a mechanism where gears moved perpendicular to their normal plane of rotation. The annotations were in Sebastian's precise handwriting. Demonstrated March 15, 1985. Achieved 4.7-second temporal displacement. RH witnessed and demanded immediate cessation. RH. Mara Hendricks. Her father. March 15, 1985. Exactly 40 years before Ivy's birth on March 15, 2018. The coincidence felt deliberate, though Mara couldn't imagine what it meant. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She descended to find Officer Kowalski accompanied by a woman in her 50s, carrying an official-looking folder. "Ms. Hendricks, this is Rebecca Morrison from Child Protective Services. She's here to assess living conditions." Rebecca's smile was professional but not unkind. "May I come in?" Mara led them through the museum, showing the third-floor improvements. Rebecca documented everything with photographs and notes. The functioning heat, the repaired electrical system, the clean sleeping area Mara had prepared for Ivy. The woman's expression remained neutral, revealing nothing. After 30 minutes, Rebecca closed her folder. "The immediate safety concerns have been addressed. However, I have questions about long-term stability. This building requires significant ongoing maintenance. How do you plan to fund that without employment?" "I'm opening the museum as a functioning business. Educational tours, research access, event rentals. My uncle's collection has significant historical value that I can leverage for grants and donor support." "That's ambitious. Do you have a business plan? Projected revenues? Any experience running a museum?" Mara's stomach sank. She had none of those things. Just desperation and determination, neither of which qualified as credentials. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Ms. Hendricks, I'm not trying to take your daughter, but I need to see evidence that you can provide stable housing and financial support. I'm giving you 2 weeks. If you can demonstrate a viable plan for sustaining this property and supporting Ivy, we'll close the case. If not, we'll need to discuss temporary placement options while you get your situation stabilized." After they left, Mara sat on the spiral staircase with her head in her hands. 2 weeks. 14 days to transform a dying museum into a viable business, to prove she could support her daughter in a building that needed tens of thousands in repairs. Arthur found her there an hour later, carrying a box of files. "I've been going through Sebastian's correspondence archives. Look at this." He spread papers across the workshop bench. Letters from museums, universities, private collectors, all expressing interest in Sebastian's research. Some dated back decades, others were more recent. Many included offers to fund research if Sebastian would share his findings about temporal mechanics. He turned down millions in research grants, Arthur said. Refused every offer because accepting would mean revealing too much about what he'd discovered. But you're not Sebastian. You haven't promised anyone secrecy. You're saying I should reach out to these institutions? Offer access to his research? I'm saying you leverage what you have. Sebastian spent 40 years proving this collection has scholarly value. Use that. Approach the right people, make the right pitch, and you could secure funding that makes the museum financially sustainable. Mara studied the letters, hope warring with doubt. And if they ask what makes Sebastian's research so revolutionary, if they want to know about the perpetual paradox and the vault, you tell them about the collection, about Sebastian's mechanical innovations, his historical documentation, his theoretical work. All of that is real and valuable without mentioning temporal displacement or impossible vaults. You give them enough truth to be compelling without revealing the dangerous parts. It could work. Mara had marketing skills, design experience, enough business sense to craft a compelling proposal. What she lacked was time. I need help. Someone who knows this world, who can open doors quickly. Arthur pulled out his phone. I know someone. Catherine Lee. She's a curator at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. She and Sebastian corresponded for years about his collection. She's been trying to get access to his research since he died. Within hours, Catherine was on a video call, her face filling Mara's laptop screen with focused intensity. Mid-50s, Chinese-American, with sharp eyes that missed nothing as Mara showed her around the museum via phone camera. This is extraordinary, Catherine breathed, watching footage of the second-floor displays. Sebastian told me the collection was comprehensive, but this is one of the finest assemblages of horological specimens I've ever seen. That Breguet precision marine chronometer alone is museum quality. And that early American shelf clock, is that an original Terry patent timepiece from 1816? According to the documentation, yes. Mara, institutions would fight for access to this collection. If you're willing to partner with established museums for research and exhibition purposes, you could secure funding, expertise, and legitimacy that would make your museum untouchable. They spent 3 hours on the call. Catherine outlined partnership possibilities. Loan agreements where pieces from Sebastian's collection would be displayed at major museums with credit to the Temporal Museum. Research collaborations where scholars could access Sebastian's archives. Grant opportunities through historical preservation organizations. By evening, Mara had the framework of a business plan. Catherine would visit in person within 3 days to assess the collection formally. She'd bring colleagues from other institutions, generating multiple partnership opportunities simultaneously. If even half the proposal succeeded, the museum would have funding streams and institutional support that would make closure impossible. One thing, Catherine said as they prepared to end the call. Sebastian mentioned in his letters that he had pieces he kept in private storage, items too valuable or significant to display publicly. Do you know anything about that? Mara thought about the vault, about the crates labeled with Ernst Richter's name. I'm still cataloging everything. If I find additional materials, I'll let you know. After the call ended, Mara sat in the workshop area, staring at the perpetual paradox. It sat in its broken case, hands frozen at midnight, looking like nothing more than an elaborate antique clock. No one examining it would guess what it could do, what it could unlock. But they'd ask questions. Why was it displayed separately? What made it special? And eventually, someone would notice the keyhole on its base, would wonder what it opened. She needed to make the clock invisible. Not literally, that would draw more attention, but psychologically, make it seem ordinary enough that visitors would admire it briefly and move on without deeper investigation. Mara spent the next day creating new display materials. She researched Ernst Richter, finding the official history, a Bavarian clockmaker of modest reputation who'd produced several dozen fine timepieces before his death in 1889. No mention of temporal mechanics or impossible discoveries. Just a craftsman whose work showed technical skill, but not genius. She wrote a new placard for the perpetual paradox, emphasizing its mechanical complexity while downplaying its uniqueness. Presented it as an excellent example of late 19th century European craftsmanship rather than a revolutionary achievement. Arthur watched her work with understanding, making it boring, making it safe. If Catherine or her colleagues get interested in this clock specifically, they might start testing it, analyzing its mechanisms. Better if it blends into the collection as just another fine piece. And the vault stays sealed. Whatever's down there, we protect it like Sebastian did. That night, Ivy woke screaming. Mara rushed to her daughter's room, finding the child sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror. He's trying to get in. Great Uncle Sebastian says he's trying to break the lock. Who's trying to get in, baby? The mayor. He's in the basement with machines. He's trying to open the floor, but it won't open because the key is here. Ivy pointed at the pocket watch on the dresser. Great Uncle Sebastian says we have to hide it better. Says the mayor will tear the whole building apart if he knows it exists. Ivy, you're having nightmares. The mayor isn't in the basement. A sound from below cut her off. Not imagination. Real noise. Metal scraping against stone, distant but unmistakable. Mara grabbed the pocket watch and her phone, then took Ivy's hand. Stay quiet. Stay close. They descended the spiral staircase slowly. The first floor was dark except for moonlight through dirty windows. The scraping sound continued, coming from beneath their feet. Someone was in the basement. Mara hadn't even known the museum had a basement. Sebastian's floor plans showed only 3 stories. But as she moved toward the sound source, she noticed something she'd missed before, a door beneath the spiral staircase, so perfectly integrated into the wall paneling that it appeared to be decorative molding. She pressed her ear against it. The scraping had stopped. Now she heard voices, muffled by thick wood and stone. Has to be here. James said he saw it open. Searching for 3 hours. There's no mechanism, no trigger. Mayor Harrison Reed and someone else. They'd broken into the basement. Were looking for the vault entrance. Mara pulled out her phone, dialing 911. But before she could hit send, the basement door burst open. Harrison emerged, covered in dust, followed by 2 men carrying surveying equipment. He froze when he saw Mara and Ivy. "What are you doing in my building?" Mara demanded, positioning herself between Harrison and her daughter. "Emergency inspection. We received reports of structural instability in the foundation." At midnight, without notifying me, Harrison's expression hardened. "We don't need permission to ensure public safety, and what we found down there confirms our concerns. The basement has unauthorized excavations, unstable floor supports, evidence of illegal construction that violates every building code in the state. I didn't make any excavations. This is how my uncle left it. Then your uncle was conducting illegal activities, which makes this building subject to immediate condemnation and seizure." Harrison pulled out papers. "This is a municipal order. You have 48 hours to vacate. After that, the property reverts to county control for unpaid taxes and code violations. You can't do this." "I can, and I am. Your uncle spent 40 years thumbing his nose at this town's development, hoarding valuable property while Millbrook died around him. That ends now." Ivy stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the tension. "You saw it, didn't you? When you were down there. You saw where it opened for your nephew. And now you want to open it yourself." Harrison's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. James saw all the time at once, and it broke his brain. But you think you're smarter than him. Think you can control what's down there." Ivy's eyes were too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Great Uncle Sebastian says people like you always think they can control what they don't understand. That's why they get destroyed by it." One of Harrison's men shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should. We're done here." Harrison moved toward the front door, his companions following. At the threshold, he turned back. 48 hours, Ms. Hendricks. I suggest you spend them packing rather than fighting. This building is coming down, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." After they left, Mara locked every door, checked every window, then carried Ivy back upstairs. The child was trembling despite her earlier bravado. "Did I do wrong?" Great Uncle Sebastian said to warn him, to make him understand it's dangerous. But he didn't listen. "You did exactly right, baby." Mara held her daughter close. And you're right. He didn't listen. Which means we need a different plan. She called Arthur, waking him with the news. He arrived within 30 minutes, still in pajamas, his face grim. They're going to demolish the building. They'll claim it's for public safety, but really they're trying to force access to the vault. Can they do that legally? With enough political pressure and fabricated code violations? Probably. Small-town politics run on relationships and backroom deals. Harrison controls the building inspector, the town council, most of the county officials. If he wants this building condemned, it'll be condemned. Mara paced the workshop area, her mind racing. So we go over his head. State level. Federal, if necessary. Catherine, Lee has Smithsonian connections. If we can get the museum designated as nationally significant, that takes months. We have 48 hours. Then we make those 48 hours count. Mara pulled up Catherine's contact information. We call every media outlet, every preservation organization, every politician who owes favors to the Smithsonian. We make this a story about corrupt, small-town officials trying to destroy historical treasures for personal profit. We create enough public pressure that Harrison can't move forward without committing political suicide. Arthur looked doubtful, but nodded. I'll contact the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. They have emergency designation authority for threatened properties. They worked through the night. Mara crafted press releases emphasizing the collection's historical significance and the suspicious timing of the condemnation order. Arthur called every contact he had in preservation circles. By dawn, they'd reached journalists from Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. The story had everything media loved: corrupt politicians, threatened historical treasures, a single mother fighting City Hall. By 8 a.m., news vans were rolling into Millbrook. By noon, the street outside the museum was packed with cameras, reporters, and preservation advocates who'd driven hours to witness what was being called the Millbrook Museum Crisis. Victoria Grayson attempted damage control, giving interviews about the family's commitment to preserving historical character while ensuring public safety. But her carefully practiced concern couldn't compete with footage of the museum's interior. Thousands of beautiful timepieces arranged in displays that looked like temporal artwork. Catherine Lee arrived at 2 p.m. with 3 colleagues from major East Coast museums. They spent 4 hours examining the collection, their excitement building with each room explored. This is Smithsonian caliber, Catherine declared in an impromptu press conference on the museum's front steps. Mara Hendricks assembled one of the finest private collections of horological specimens in North America. Condemning this building would be cultural vandalism of the highest order. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission representative arrived at 5 p.m., conducted a rapid assessment, and issued a preliminary emergency designation protecting the property from demolition pending full review. Harrison's condemnation order was suspended. The mayor stood in the street below, surrounded by reporters, his face rigid with barely contained fury as he fielded questions about why he'd attempted to demolish a nationally significant collection. Mara watched from the observation deck. Ivy beside her, both wrapped in blankets against the November cold. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. He'll try again, Arthur said, joining them. Different approach, same goal. He knows something is down there, and he won't stop until he gets it. Then we make sure there's nothing to get. That night, after the reporters left and Millbrook quieted, Mara descended to the workshop with a pocket watch and the perpetual paradox key. She'd been thinking about Sebastian's letter. What was hidden becomes visible. What was locked becomes open. The vault had opened when James touched the clock, but it had also sealed when Mara turned the key, which meant the mechanism responded to specific actions under specific conditions. What if there was a way to seal it permanently? To lock the vault so thoroughly that no one could access it again, even during a new moon with both hands at midnight? She examined the perpetual paradox carefully, studying its mechanisms through the crystal face. The gears that moved in impossible directions, that passed through each other without touching. Ernst Richter had built something that defied physics as she understood it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the defiance itself was the key. Mara opened the pocket watch, removing the tiny key from its chain. She inserted it into the perpetual paradox's lock and turned it the opposite direction from before, not forward to seal, but backward to... Oh. The clock began ticking. Not backward this time. Forward, but accelerating, the hands spinning faster and faster until they blurred. The gears rotated at impossible speed, creating a humming that Mara felt in her bones. She tried to remove the key. It wouldn't budge. The floor beneath the clock began to glow, but differently than before. Instead of the phosphorescent blue, the light was golden, warm, pulsing in rhythm with the accelerating ticks. Mara stepped back, heart pounding. What had she done? The hands reached midnight and kept going, spinning through hours that hadn't happened yet, time unwinding forward at speeds that made no sense. Then abruptly, everything stopped. The perpetual paradox went silent. Its hands frozen at 11:47, the exact time displayed on the tower clock outside. The exact time Sebastian had died. The key fell out of the lock, landing on the floor with a metallic clink. Mara picked it up carefully. The metal was hot, almost burning her fingers. She wrapped it in her sleeve, examining the perpetual paradox. Something had changed. The clock looked the same, but there was a quality to its stillness that felt permanent, as if it had been turned off in a way that couldn't be reversed. She knelt, running her hands over the floorboards where the vault entrance had opened. They felt solid, more than solid. They felt fused, as if the wood had been molecularly bonded to the stone beneath. Understanding dawned slowly. By turning the key backward while the vault was sealed, she hadn't opened it. She'd locked it permanently, fused the temporal mechanism that allowed access. The vault still existed, 30 feet below, filled with Ernst Richter's secrets. But now there was no way to reach it. Not in this timeline, anyway. Footsteps on the stairs made her spin around. Arthur descended, his face concerned. I heard the ticking. What did you do? I sealed it. Permanently. Mara held up the key. The vault is still there, but no one can access it now. Not during new moons, not with this key, not ever. Arthur's expression cycled through shock, understanding, and finally relief. Sebastian would approve. He spent 40 years protecting it. You've made that protection eternal. But what if there was something down there that could help people? What if Richter's research could advance physics or medicine, or what if it couldn't? Arthur interrupted gently. What if the only thing down there is knowledge that breaks minds and destroys the people who discover it? Your uncle opened that vault once. It cost him his relationship with his brother, 40 years of isolation, and probably contributed to his death. James spent 60 seconds down there and emerged psychologically shattered. Maybe some doors should stay closed. Mara thought about Ivy's words. Some truths have to wait until enough people are ready to believe them. Perhaps the world would never be ready for what Ernst Richter had discovered. Perhaps that was acceptable. She placed the key back in a pocket watch, closed the case, and tucked it in her pocket. The perpetual paradox would remain on display, beautiful and mysterious and utterly inert. A memorial to her uncle's dedication rather than a functional mechanism. The next morning brought new developments. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission issued formal documentation designating the Temporal Museum of Mechanized Horology as a site of historical significance. Catherine Lee announced that the Smithsonian would partner with Mara to catalog and preserve Sebastian's collection, providing both funding and expertise. 3 universities expressed interest in sending graduate students to study the archives. 2 preservation foundations offered grants totaling $85,000 for building restoration. A documentary filmmaker wanted to create a film about Sebastian's life and work. Within a week, the museum had transformed from dying relic to cultural institution. The attention brought tourists, not many, but enough to generate modest revenue. Mara hired local teenagers to give tours, created a website showcasing the collection, established relationships with horological societies worldwide. Rebecca Morrison returned for a follow-up assessment, documenting the improvements with visible approval. You've created something remarkable here, Ms. Hendricks. I'm closing the CPS case with no further action required. The property tax issue was resolved through a combination of grant funding and a payment plan with the county. Harrison Reed attempted to block it, but his political capital had evaporated after the media attention. The town council voted unanimously to approve the arrangement, effectively overruling the mayor. 2 months after Mara's arrival in Millbrook, the museum opened for its first official public tour. 50 people attended, including journalists, scholars, and curious locals. Arthur led the historical overview, while Mara discussed Sebastian's research and collection methodology. Ivy served as junior docent, explaining timepiece mechanisms with the confident enthusiasm of a child who'd memorized more than anyone expected. She was particularly proud of the perpetual paradox, telling visitors about its complex gears and mysterious origins. No one asked why the clock didn't run. They assumed it was too delicate, too valuable to risk operating. Mara didn't correct them. That evening, after the last visitor left and Ivy fell asleep, exhausted from excitement, Mara sat in Sebastian's third-floor bedroom. She'd found his final journal there. Its last entry dated the day before he died. The handwriting was shaky, evidence of his failing health, but the words were clear. I placed the key in Mara's timeline, positioned precisely when she'll need it. The temporal displacement was more difficult than previous attempts. My heart couldn't take the strain. But it's done. When she arrives desperate and afraid, she'll find what she needs to protect herself and Ivy. Robert was right about the vault. Some knowledge destroys rather than enlightens. I've seen what's down there. Richter's proof that time isn't linear, that past and future exist simultaneously. The human consciousness is too limited to process temporal totality without fragmenting. James Reed will try to access it. He'll fail, but in failing, he'll show Mara why the vault must stay sealed. Then she'll make the choice I couldn't, permanent closure. The perpetual paradox will become just another beautiful artifact, its true purpose forgotten. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this in person, Mara. Sorry I couldn't explain why your father and I fought, why I seemed to abandon the family. But time is a circle, not a line. This moment, you reading this after sealing the vault, is the moment I've been working toward for 40 years. You've done what needed doing. Protected the future by locking away a past that was never meant to be discovered. Your father would be proud. I'm proud. Rest now. The museum is yours. The truth is safe. And Ivy will grow up in a place where time flows forward as it should, uninterrupted by mechanisms that bend it toward impossible revelations. Uncle Sebastian. Mara closed the journal carefully, tears streaming down her face. Sebastian had known everything, had orchestrated her arrival, had placed the key in Ivy's room using the very temporal mechanics he was protecting her from, had died knowing she would seal the vault permanently, that his 40-year vigil would end with security rather than revelation. She thought about her father, the physicist who'd fought with Sebastian after seeing the vault's contents. Had Robert understood what his brother was trying to do? Had he forgiven him before the end? A sound made her look up. Ivy stood in the doorway. Mr. Whiskers clutched her chest. Great Uncle Sebastian says goodbye, the child said softly. He says he can rest now because we finished his work. Did you dream about him again? Not dream. He was just here, standing by the window, looking at the stars. Ivy pointed to the spot. He said time is a circle, and now the circle is complete. He said to tell you he loves you, and he's sorry, and thank you. Mara pulled her daughter close, not questioning whether the visit had been real or imagined. In a building where temporal mechanics had created impossible locks and a pocket watch could appear across decades, the boundary between dream and reality felt meaningless. I love you too, Uncle Sebastian, she whispered to the empty room. And you're welcome. Outside, the tower clock began to chime. Not possible. It had been stopped at 11:47 for months. But 12 clear tones rang across Millbrook, marking midnight with crystalline precision. Then silence. Mara went to the window. The tower clock's hands had moved. No longer frozen at 11:47, they now pointed straight up. Midnight. The completion of the circle. She understood then. Sebastian had stopped the clocks at 11:47, the moment of his death, creating a temporal marker that held until Mara sealed the vault. Now, with the mechanism permanently locked and the dangerous knowledge secured forever, time could resume its normal flow. The museum's clocks began ticking, thousands of them, waking simultaneously in a symphony of mechanical rhythm. Grandfather clocks in deep bass, wall clocks in steady tenor, pocket watches in delicate soprano. The sound built and blended, creating a harmony that Mara felt in her bones. Time flowing forward as it should, measured and marked by devices built to contain it, not manipulate it. Over the following months, the museum thrived. Mara hired 3 full-time staff and contracted with Arthur as chief restoration specialist. The collection's reputation grew as scholars published papers based on Sebastian's research archives. Tourism increased steadily, bringing revenue that funded ongoing improvements. Ivy flourished. She made friends at the local school, joined the science club, started a blog about horology that gained surprising popularity among educational circles. Her natural intelligence found outlet in academic pursuits rather than temporal mysteries. Harrison Reed resigned as mayor following an ethics investigation into his attempt to condemn the museum. Victoria Grayson's development company faced scrutiny from state regulators. The Reed and Grayson family's grip on Millbrook loosened, allowing new leadership to emerge. James Reed remained institutionalized, his mind too fragmented to reconstruct. Doctors diagnosed him with severe psychotic disorder, unable to explain his conviction that he'd seen all of time. His family quietly committed him to long-term psychiatric care. Catherine Lee returned quarterly, each visit bringing new opportunities. A major exhibition at the Smithsonian featuring pieces from Sebastian's collection. A documentary film that premiered at a prestigious festival. A book deal for Mara to write about her uncle's life and work. The pocket watch remained in Mara's possession, locked in a safe deposit box at the local bank. The key to a vault that no longer needed protecting because it could no longer be accessed. A reminder of what had been sacrificed to keep dangerous knowledge buried. On the anniversary of their arrival in Millbrook, Mara and Ivy stood in the workshop area before the perpetual paradox. The clock sat in its repaired case, beautiful and silent, its hands permanently frozen at 11:47. "Do you miss him?" Ivy asked. "Great Uncle Sebastian?" "Every day. But I think he's still here, in a way. Every clock in this museum, every piece he collected and preserved, they're all parts of his story. Ways he's still teaching people about time, about dedication, about protecting what matters." Ivy pressed her palm against the perpetual paradox's case. "I don't dream about him anymore. He stopped visiting after you locked the vault." "Do you miss the dreams?" "Sometimes. But he said his work was done. That now it's our work. Keeping the museum going, helping people understand that time is precious because it only flows one direction." Ivy smiled. "He said that's the most important truth. Not the complicated stuff about temporal mechanics or impossible gears. Just that every moment matters because we only get it once." Mara hugged her daughter, looking around at the museum they'd built together. Not just preserved, but transformed into something living and purposeful. A place where time was honored rather than manipulated, where Sebastian's legacy continued without the dangerous knowledge he'd spent 40 years protecting. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like tiny planets in their own orbits. Somewhere in the building, a clock chimed 3 o'clock. Then another, and another, the notes cascading in mechanical harmony. Time flowing forward, measured in seconds that became minutes, that became hours, that became the days and months and years of a life well lived. Mara thought about the eviction notice that had brought her here, the desperation that it seemed like ending but was actually beginning, about the impossible inheritance that had seemed like burden but became blessing, about the vault 30 feet below, sealed forever, holding secrets the world would never know. Some truths Sebastian had understood were too dangerous to discover. Some knowledge broke rather than enlightened. Some doors needed to stay closed so that others could open safely. The museum was her truth now, her legacy to build, her daughter's future to secure, not through temporal manipulation or impossible mechanisms, but through dedication and hard work, and the steady accumulation of moments flowing forward into purpose. "Come on, baby," Mara said, taking Ivy's hand. "We have a tour group arriving in 20 minutes. And tomorrow, Catherine is bringing researchers from Oxford who want to study the astronomical clocks. And next week, the school field trip. They climbed to the third floor to prepare, leaving the perpetual paradox alone in its case. The clock sat silent and still, keeping its secrets, its impossible gears frozen in configurations that defied physics, but no longer threatened reality. Outside, Millbrook spread across the valley in late afternoon light. The town was changing, new businesses opening, young families moving in, the slow death spiral reversing in a cautious renewal. The museum had become anchor point, proof that preservation and progress could coexist. Mara stood at the window, watching people move through streets that Sebastian had walked for 40 years. He'd lived alone, died alone, sacrificed relationships and comfort to protect knowledge he believed was too dangerous to share. She wouldn't make the same choices, wouldn't isolate herself in service of secrets. The vault was sealed, the danger contained. Now she could live openly, build community, raise her daughter in light rather than shadow. "Thank you, Uncle Sebastian," she whispered one final time, "for trusting me, for believing I'd make the right choice, for giving us this place to call home." The tower clock chimed 4 o'clock, its mechanism restored and functioning perfectly. Time marching forward, measured and marked, flowing as it should. Downstairs, the museum's front door opened. The tour group arriving early, excited voices echoing through halls lined with temporal treasures. Mara descended to greet them, ready to share Sebastian's story without revealing its darkest chapters, ready to celebrate his achievements without exposing his sacrifices, ready to live in the present rather than being haunted by a past that could never be changed or a future that was too dangerous to know. The Temporal Museum of Mechanized Horology stood solid against the November cold, its lights burning warm in gathering dusk. 3 stories of red brick and limestone, tower clock marking hours, spiral staircase connecting past to present to future in continuous flow. And deep below, 30 feet of stone and sealed mechanisms, a vault that would remain locked forever. Its secrets protected, its knowledge buried. Some doors stayed closed for good reason. Mara had found the courage to keep them that way, and in doing so, had opened all the doors that truly mattered, to home, to purpose, to a future built on solid ground rather than temporal impossibilities. Time flowed forward, as it should, as it must, as it always would, in a museum dedicated to measuring its passage rather than manipulating its direction. The circle was complete. Thank you so much for watching this entire journey. If you love this story, check out the other incredible stories on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.